there, I'm Dr. Leah Light from the Brainchild Institute. I wanted to tell you a little bit about what we do here at Brainchild and why we do things in the order that we do them. For many years I thought to myself, where do I begin with these children that are having some learning struggles and attention and behavioral issues? Where do I begin? What is the first step for them? I had to take it all the way back to our humble beginnings. How does the brain even develop in utero? And then what happens after we're born? What is the hierarchy of our brain development? And so we trace it all the way back to primary reflexes. We are all born with a number of these reflexes. Babies across the globe have these primary reflexes, and you probably have seen them but not identified them, such as sucking, for example, or if you put your finger in a baby's hand, they'll grasp it, or if you stroke the side of a baby's foot, the big toe will arch back. All of these reflexes that we have are actually for protection and survival in the early months of life. And then we develop more deliberate movements, and they kind of weave their way into the fabric of our motor and cognitive development. When the reflexes are not well integrated as they should be within the first 2 years of life, in particular, most of them integrate even within the first 6 months of life, then they will cause gaps in the foundation of our development. We'll have a harder time developing our social and emotional spheres and then our cognitive spheres. Or we may have a lot of information going to certain parts of the brain and not enough information going to other parts of the brain. So we have a lot of very uneven learning. So at Brainchild, our first stop is looking at these primary reflexes and how well organized they are. These reflexes occur at the very bottom of the brain, called the brainstem, and the brainstem develops from the bottom to the top. Our next stop is, once the reflexes are well integrated, we're looking at what's happening in terms of the connections between the two hemispheres. Is the right hemisphere talking to the left hemisphere? Is the left hemisphere talking to the right hemisphere? Because each hemisphere has very different functions. Our right brain is more about how you say what you say and about our emotions. More of our motor functions and our vestibular processing is happening on the right hemisphere as well, in the right hemisphere. The left hemisphere is more about language, and it's more about details and factual information, data. It's more digital, if you will. And so our left brain loves computer screens and cell phones. It loves books and tablets. It's very 1 and 2 dimensional, and it's very linear in terms of its processing and factual, as I mentioned. And so in order to really understand the full meaning of information, to get the really bigger picture, so for example, if I said to you, that's just great, or I said, oh, that's just great. Without the two hemispheres working well together, you might not understand the difference between those two statements. So we're working on certain structures that help to connect the two hemispheres. And then lastly, we're looking at some of the higher orders of the brain, certain programs that we use to target cognitive functions. What are you thinking about? When are you thinking about it? Can you control your impulses? Do you know when is the right time to say a certain thing? Can you process information that you're hearing at a higher level, or information that you're seeing? Can you have deductive reasoning? Do you have logical thinking? How are all these systems wired together? And that's really the higher order of the brain, sort of the last stop. I call it the light bulb. But before you can get your light bulb to go off, as we expect our little ones in school, we want to see their light bulbs clicking all over the place, and they're learning all kinds of new skills, reading, writing, math, history, and so forth. But unless we get electricity to those light bulbs, they are just not going to go off. And so we have to look at the underlying foundational pieces of the brain first and build that neurological foundation and that scaffolding so that we can get those higher levels of cognitive development to do what they're really supposed to do.